Hey Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. In this video, we'll answer your mailbag questions, break down the defensive depth chart, and look at some keys to beating Northwestern in the season opener. But before we get to that, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure you get all of our Husker content, and get into the comments section so that you can tell us how you feel about the Cornhuskers. As always, go Big Red. Welcome back to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. I'm Chris Peterson of Husker Big Red, and joining me as always, my co-host Danny Gillette of thegreatcornholio.org. How are you doing this morning, Danny?
How we doing? We have, Thursday, so 9 days until Northwestern, and I can't believe how close it is. And I'm just reading all of these Nebraska chats that I'm in, and boy, do we need football. In one of the chats I was in, we were arguing over who was in a certain special teams picture. I'm like, okay, we really need football to come right now because this is just ridiculous level stuff that we're getting to. But hey, such is
Yeah, it's
Nebraska Twitter
I
for
saw
any of
one
you who
tweet
are
that
on it.
someone put was really cool, was talking about the people who have grinded through the off season, and here come the casual fans. I thought that was pretty funny, because
I
it's
did see that.
being a true Husker fan's 365 days a year. There's no days off. There's recruiting, transfers, everything, man. The off season's huge. So if you're a true Nebraska fan, it's hard to pick it up right now. But if you are picking it up right now, like we'll help you get caught up. So follow us along at Husker Big Red, thegreatcornholio.org. We've got all your football, basketball coverage, recruiting, literally everything. And so to get it started, we're gonna do some mailbag questions today, talk some defensive depth chart. But first, we can't have this podcast without touching on the new uniforms out that Nebraska's released. Not new, but they're going to be using kind of an alternate uniform this year, and it's always a hotly debated topic among fans, alternate uniforms or any style of uniform. So just quickly, Danny, what are your thoughts on the new alternate uniform released?
I read that it was a homage, if you will,
I,
to the 1983
yeah, I
Nebraska
believe
team,
83 or
if
yeah,
I
I think
remember
so.
reading correctly. And so I really like these uniforms. I think they're sharp. I like the way they look, and it's simple, it's clean. I believe there's no stripe. I'm just looking at a picture right now, and I believe there's no stripe on like the uniform itself, but I still like them. I mean, I personally like the all black uniforms, but I like these too. I mean, you know, it still stays true to the Nebraska color scheme, and it's not like Oregon where they have 75,000 different colors every
Yeah,
single game.
I don't.
So
I'm not a big
that
fan
I
of
can
what
appreciate.
Oregon does, and yeah, I like them. I like the traditional
Yeah.
Nebraska uniform. I like the helmet. I like the red helmet. The only helmet change I don't mind is when they did the all black and they had like the black N, the black stripe. I thought that was cool. But those alternate when they had those
Yeah.
really ugly, they were like black helmets with that huge N. That was atrocious. That uniform combination was horrible. I never want to see that again. Just
Yeah.
don't mess with the N. I don't care really about anything else, but don't blow up the N. You can change it to slightly black or whatever, but it's like Alabama doesn't need an alternate helmet because the helmet they have already is cool, and the same with Michigan, Notre Dame, you know what I mean? Like if you've got, and I think Nebraska has one of those, they've got one of those great iconic logos, so don't mess with it. And they didn't in this one. I liked it. It's nothing crazy, but it's like you said, it stayed true to the colors. Kind of was a tribute to that great team back in the '80s under Tom Osborne. So yeah, I like it. I can't wait to see it, and I'm glad they didn't get too crazy with the uniform.
And it's another excuse to sell merchandise. So I mean, I guess they're real winners here as well. I mean, I do like the black shirt, skull and crossbones. I believe my black jersey has the skull and crossbones on it, so I do like that. But and can I just point something out to anybody who says, "Well, the team should focus on winning games and not about uniforms"? The players and coaches have zero control over what uniforms are put out. They probably have zero input as to what kind of uniforms they wear. So they are definitely focused. And this is all up to the marketing and social media department. I just love seeing that. Oh, they should focus on, preparing for Northwestern. Well, they have zero input when
Yeah,
it comes to
totally. They
these
don't,
uniforms, and they just wear them.
yeah, they're not worried about the uniforms or anything. But it can be something that players do appreciate. I remember last year, this was one thing that Michigan did is Jim
Oh
Harbaugh
yeah.
started to let his captains pick the uniform combinations. So if they want to do all whatever, so I don't know. I just think letting the players have more of a say in that type of stuff because they care how they look. I mean, they want to look cool, which I think Nebraska always does look cool, except when they turned
Oh
on
yeah.
those insane black huge N helmets. Those were ugly. It was horrible, but other than that, Nebraska always looks cool. But yeah, main point is that these guys aren't worried about the uniforms. Scott Frost isn't. These decisions have been made beforehand too, like a long time ago. Like it's not like they made this decision last week, made the uniform, and did the photo shoot. Like that stuff happened before. It's just being released now. So, anyways, to transition, we're going to hit on, some more news quickly before we get too wrapped up in football. I know basketball season's a long ways away, but we do have some news there. And, Danny, you've been kind of talking about it with Ernie Ziegler, the new addition to, the basketball staff, was a former head coach at Central Michigan, worked at UCLA and Mississippi State under Ben Howland. So what do you think about this addition to Fred Hoiberg's staff?
I think it's a great addition because when you look at his experience, like you mentioned, it's incredible. He's been to the postseason 7 times. He was part of the 2005, 2006 UCLA basketball team that was, the NCAA runner-up, and he is a good recruiter. He secured, I believe, a top 10 recruiting class for UCLA in a season while he was there. And, you talk about losing some of the coaching staff during the offseason. This is a good replacement. Ziegler is a guy that has postseason experience, and, he has the ability to recruit, and I think that's going to be important for Nebraska basketball because the one thing that they've been able to do is recruit. I'm interested to see what he brings on the court. You can only, you know, it only matters if you win games on the court. But I do like this hire. I think, you know, there's experience there. There's NCAA tournament experience there, and it's kind of a theme with some of the new additions for Nebraska basketball. When you look at a player like Juan Gary from Alabama, he has played in the NCAA tournament, so getting that kind of tournament experience and postseason experience, could be an asset for this Nebraska basketball team as they quite
Yeah, it's
frankly
been
struggled to win.
Fred's kind of been doing what Scott Frost has been doing a little bit, kind of changing over some program, guys bringing in some new assistants. But I really like this hire because, not only like you said, he's been a head coach, but Ben Howland was always, kind of a defensive minded guy, and we all know Nebraska's defense could be better, and I think it kind of works. I'm not saying that I have no idea if this is how it's going to work, but I think it works well when you have a coach that's almost like a defensive coordinator in basketball. We're starting to see that more. Maybe Nebraska could, have some of that type of stuff because we know that Hoiberg, knows how to run the offense. I mean, Nebraska can score points. That hasn't been an issue, but you can't give up like 88 points a game and expect to win very much. So, um, but beyond that, I think it's about recruiting, and I think we've already seen Keante, I don't know if you saw this, but former Florida, standout Keante Johnson's going to be visiting Nebraska this week. It's not clear, he's got a lot of medical concerns. He collapsed on the floor, and that's kind of what stopped his Florida career. But that season,
Yeah.
in that preseason, he was the preseason SEC Player of the Year. And in 2019, 2020, the year prior to that, he averaged like 14 points and 7 rebounds a game. He looked like Kansas State was going to be, kind of the destination. He did transfer May 1st, so I believe he's going to be eligible to play this season if he, gets the clearance for it. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, Nebraska's in the mix just after hiring a coach, who was at Mississippi State last season. And guys don't, they don't take visits if they're not, serious about it. So I think that this is going to give Nebraska a real chance. And you look at Nebraska against Kansas State. I mean, Fred Hoiberg does have that NBA experience, and Keante Johnson, if he's healthy, is a guy that's got NBA potential. So I think it could be a fit there. But on the recruiting side of things, I think it's a good move overall for Nebraska to, this new coaching hire. And I think the way they're going about recruiting is the right way, at least in some of their recent moves.
And you mentioned the new coaching hire. I think it fits well with the hire of Adam Howard, which they did at the beginning of April. Howard is also a very defensive-minded coach. When he coached at South Alabama, they ranked in the top 40 nationally in scoring defense, and they had, 4.9, almost 5 block shots per game. And so you can see that there's a real emphasis with the new coaching staff hires on defense. And because you said it yourself, scoring has never been a problem. It's been defense and rebounding and block shots and things like that that have really been the Achilles heel. So I really like this defensive focus and you know continuing to bring in transfers with experience can only help the program. And I like the emphasis on defense as well as continuing to get impact transfers. Because, like I said, the problem hasn't been recruiting, and it's not been about not getting good talent. The problem is the fundamentals, and I think hires like Howard
Yep,
and
and
Ziegler
hopefully
will be
the
able to help
basketball
with that.
program will win some more games, like we're hoping the football program will this fall. So I think that'll be a good transition, for us here to go over to our mailbag questions. We've got quite a few that we're going to get to, and then we'll talk some of the defensive depth chart breakdown here soon. As just 9 days away from the season opener, so we'll talk to a lot of stuff there. So our first question comes from Greg, who is one of our top followers on Twitter, and his question is pretty simple: do you think Nebraska is back, Danny? What's your thoughts?
No, because we fallen into this trap so many times before, and they're not back until they start winning football games. I mean, I will say that I do feel a lot better about this season than I have in previous years, and I think, they are taking steps to being back, but I want to see the product on the field. I can drink as much Kool-Aid as I want, but if they have another losing
Yeah,
season this
and
year, it
I
might
guess
all
for
be for
me,
naught.
it's like I'm not going to say they're back until they actually like win something, not just like have a 7 or 8 win season, but this team needs to win like a division championship. The West, I think that's a totally reasonable goal for Nebraska football if the program's functioning at a normal level to, be winning that division, every few years, I think, honestly. So, because I mean, when Nebraska was added to the Big Ten, it was like they were supposed to be one of the big programs with Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska. They were the West Division wasn't supposed to be, much worse than the East. But a big part of the reason why it has been that way is because Nebraska has been a total flop. They were supposed to be, when they came in, Nebraska was a top 20 program every single year, and it's just totally fallen by the wayside. So that's kind of my expectation for Nebraska to be back is ranked every year, winning 8 or 9 games, winning the Big Ten West. I think those are all realistic goals. And I think this season to me is more about just taking that first step back in the right direction. It'd be great if some of those things happen this year. I do think Nebraska is going to beat a ranked team this year. I think they're going to get some defining wins. I think they're going to get about 8 total, but they're still not quite back though in my book, and not even an 8 win season, would make me say Nebraska's back.
No, and it's about building continuity, something that hasn't happened with this program in recent memory. And you know, they have the talent to do it. They just need to execute. It seems like that's been the story for quite a while now, but it's true. I mean, they really need to have a good year and continue to build this new edition of the program because with this new coaching staff, it kind of does feel like a new edition of the program, doesn't it? Like it really kind of has a different feel to it. But
Yeah,
again,
it
the
does feel
product
like
on
it's
the
a bit of
field
a
is what matters.
reset, but like I said before, if this doesn't start well, if the season doesn't go well, it's all going to be blown up anyway. So it really has to. They've got to win these games to keep this staff continuity going forward. Because if it's just Scott Frost isn't going to survive another losing season or getting to another bowl game. I don't think Trev Alberts is going to be like, well, you went 4-8, but you made some nice offseason moves in the transfer portal. Or you. So I just think they've got to win enough to keep that momentum and to keep this staff in place for another year, and then hopefully they can put together, a few good seasons, and then, we can put all this Scott Frost hot seat talk behind us.
Quite honestly, I'm surprised that he got as big a vote of confidence, meaning Frost, as he did at the end of last season. Because you look at a new athletic director, maybe he wants to bring in some new coaches, but Alberts has remained firm with the coaching staffs in both basketball and football that he has. So, I mean, now if things don't work out this year, then you know he doesn't have any of those loyalty ties like Bill Moose did. But then again, he wasn't the uh, best athletic director, for lack of a
Yeah,
better
I think
term.
yeah, I think Trev, like I said, I believe that him and Scott are on the same page about what the expectations are, about what needed to change. I think, Scott went to him and, he kind of had that plan. It was kind of similar to what Jim Harbaugh did, except Jim kind of was forced to take that more, where I think Scott was a little more proactive because, I mean, let's face it, Scott's never won more than 5 games. I mean, so it's pretty hard to but so I think he said, he wasn't trying to, rest on his laurels. He knew something had to change. He knows he needs to get this right. But, I'll just say this about Scott Frost. This is not the first time that a bunch of people in the state of Nebraska have doubted Scott Frost. He was doubted when he was the starting quarterback, replacing Tommy Frazier, after the 96 season, and then lost 2 games. I mean, Scott Frost was not a hero at that point. People kind of blamed him. And, I mean, there's a lot of pressure that came with being the quarterback. And, he went to Stanford, he chose Bill Walsh over Tom Osborne. That was kind of the narrative. Transferred back, and then he led Nebraska to a national championship in 1997. So he knows how to prove people wrong, especially in the state of Nebraska. So I'm not betting against the guy. I still believe in him. Things have not gone their way, but I think this year they're going to. But I've been wrong, and I'll admit if I'm wrong again.
Oh yeah, I've been wrong a ton of times, and it's interesting. You look at a photo of Frost the day he was hired by Nebraska, and then you look at a photo of him now, and it's aged him considerably. So, I mean, I'll just say I would never want to be the head coach of Nebraska. Way too much pressure, but with the pressure, you know, when things are going good, it would be a great job to have. But right now, he's got to dig deep out of that hole, so to speak,
So
and kind of
our
put things
next
together.
question comes from Mrs. Goat Blitzer at Real Goat Blitzer. I love the name, love the handle there. So she poses out the question, what happens if Nebraska loses to Northwestern? Worst case scenario, Nebraska gets upset next Saturday. What's the reaction, Danny?
Frustrated. It's more of the same. That if that happens, I could see Scott Frost's hot seat getting more than just hot. Not scorching, but getting pretty hot. And I hate to do that to an overreaction. You know, after one game, but at what point it just feels like more of the same. It feels like more of the same if that happens. So if they lose to Northwestern next weekend, it's going to be an uphill battle, which has basically been one of the themes of Scott
Yeah,
Frost's
for me,
tenure. It seems
honestly,
like,
I hate to put so much on this game, but I think if they lose to Northwestern, that's the beginning of the end to me. I think that just is going to show that nothing that happened this offseason made
yeah,
a difference, that these new coaches and things can turn around. You can lose a game and still go win a month. So it's not like the season's over. But yeah, I think basically, if you lose that game, I think you almost have to beat Oklahoma, or at least you have to win you're going to have to win at least 5 games in the Big Ten, have a winning record in the Big Ten to make a bowl game. And that's not going to be easy to do if you lose that game to Northwestern, because, The rest of the schedule, it's not like overly daunting, but it's not easy, especially, you get into November and all those games are really tough. And I do think that Scott Frost has to. I mean, Nebraska. I was, doing some predictions the other day for this season on my website, huskerbigred.com. And Nebraska's lost 17 straight games to ranked opponents. 17 straight. That's unbelievable. I think that losing streak is going to end this year, but if you lose to Northwestern, just there's no confidence, no momentum. They'll beat those other teams. And then I just think it puts so much pressure on the Oklahoma game. And at some point, you've just got to find a way to win. You've got to learn how to win a close game. And that's what I'm worried about. I think Northwestern's going to make it close week one. I'd like to say Nebraska's going to dominate them like last year, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be a competitive game, and Nebraska's going to have to take care of business in the fourth quarter. And if they lose, then it's back up, it's back against the wall like right away.
And taking care of business in the fourth quarter and learning how to close a game are two of their biggest weaknesses. So I don't necessarily trust them to be able to do that should the game get close next weekend. And yeah, like if they lose to Northwestern, then it's just kind of it definitely puts Frost on a little bit more than the hot seat, and it makes you like you don't bring in an entirely new class of transfer porter players, change basically the entire coaching staff with the exception of a few to lose to Northwestern. I get that players will have to feel out the new system and it's a new this and a new that, but you don't make drastic changes like that with the thinking that a Northwestern loss
Yeah,
is
so
going to
yeah,
be how
that
the
that
season
won't be good. I
starts.
think everybody knows that. But as we kind of talk a little bit more about Northwestern, another question um, from Andrew Terrell, uh, Big Red and More Too on Twitter. He says, "How much does Nebraska need to beat Northwestern by in order to be pleased with the team overall? And also, if we lose to Northwestern, what does your total wins for the season change to?" So, kind of a two-part question there, but for one, if they lose to Nebraska, if they lose to Northwestern, does that change your projected win total? And if they do beat Northwestern, how much do they need to beat them by for you to feel good about it, I suppose.
This is a good question. This is a really good question. So I'll start with the how much do they need to beat Northwestern by? I'd say I would be comfortable with two touchdowns just because there is so much newness to the offense. I'm not expecting a blowout. A blowout would be nice. It would be nice to actually relax and watch a football game for once, but I expect, two touchdowns. That would make me feel comfortable, especially as they continue to work out the kinks and something that I don't think is talked about enough when it comes to this game is that it would be a win in conference play, which is something that Nebraska hasn't gotten a lot of in recent memory. And, the win total, oof, I don't know. The win total, because if you lose to Northwestern, then, like you said in the previous question, Chris, in your answer, it puts so much emphasis on that month of November. And that's when things get hairy. Like I want things if we're talking a bowl game, I want things 6 wins before November because I think it's going to be a rough slate. I'd say 4 wins maybe. I mean, if you lose like cuz a win against Northwestern to open the season gives you momentum and I feel like some people underestimate momentum, but when you're on a team and you win the opener, that makes you feel really good and it makes you feel confident and things are going well. If you lose, that kind of puts a damper on things. And yes, there are more games to play, but you're already digging yourself out of a hole. I don't know. What are your thoughts on
Yeah, well, for
both
one, I
parts of
agree that
those
confidence
questions,
and
Chris?
momentum, they really matter. It's when athletes know they can win, there's just a huge difference in hoping you can win and knowing you can win. And you see that every Saturday, every Sunday. You see that in the NBA. It makes a difference. So Nebraska needs to know that, like, how are you going to go? How is this team going to go into Oklahoma being like, yeah, we can beat these guys if we can't even beat Northwestern? So that's where I have that question. But in terms of beating Northwestern, like you said, that's a Big Ten game, and I'm going to feel if it's 3-0, if Nebraska wins 2-0 on a safety, I don't care. I'll be slightly concerned about the offense in that situation, but I just want to win. It doesn't matter to me if it's. I'd rather win 2-0 than lose 42-38 or whatever. Like I just need Nebraska just needs to win this game. They got to survive it. Northwestern's not going to make it easy. Everybody, I feel like, is overlooking this team, and it's like every other year. Pat Fitzgerald's programs, like they'll drop off. You forget about them one year, and then next year, all of a sudden, they're like competing for the Big Ten West. I mean, this team won the Big Ten West 2 seasons ago. Last year they dropped off. Nebraska pounded them, but I guarantee it's not going to go like that in Dublin. I know it's not going to. First game jitters. There's always mistakes and things like that. But so either way, whatever the score, I just want Nebraska to survive because it's a lot easier to, you know, kind of spin a close win than it's going to be any type of loss. In terms of the record, though, I feel pretty confident Nebraska's like right now is going to win 7 or 8 games, but that's with a win over Northwestern. If they lose that game, I'm going to say 6. I'm going to say if they lose to Northwestern, they'll probably drop my season projection to 6-6.
See, my feeling on that is if they lose to Northwestern, I feel like, players and coaches ignore the noise, but the noise is going to get pretty loud if they lose to Northwestern. And, that does, as much as, as much as they say it doesn't, players and coaches do hear that. So I could really see the stress of a potential loss to Northwestern kind of getting to the program. But hopefully will work, things will work out for the best and they'll be able to get it done because, it's definitely not going to be an easy game. They have another good running back, Northwestern does, in Evan Hall, and they like to run the football. They play tough. It seems like Northwestern always has, very good running backs. I remember Isaiah Bowser back in the day. He was tough. Hall is tough, and tough is a trait of a Pat Fitzgerald coach team. So it's going to be a tough game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout like last year. I mean, and I'm
Yeah, and
excited to
that will lead
see
us to
what
our last
happens.
question from Husker Dockward. And the handle is at Husker Tedward, all one word. And his question, kind of you touched on a little bit, but what do you think are the keys for Nebraska to beating Nebraska or Northwestern? Excuse me.
Well, keys for Nebraska to beat Nebraska, I could actually answer that question quite in full from the past couple of years. But as far as beating Northwestern, I think stopping the run. Hull, like I said, is a strong running back. Um, I'm not too worried about quarterback play just because, I think, Northwestern likes to feature the run. Northwestern likes to feature the run, and also in terms of what we can do, just convert in the red zone. Because, even though they're not the strongest defense in the Big Ten, Northwestern makes life tough on you. They make life tough on Nebraska defensively. And with the exception of last year, it's been close games, the last couple of years. So I think that converting in the red zone and stopping the run and just kind of not a football point, but keeping that stamina up for the fourth quarter because Northwestern's going to run and they're going to wear you down. So I think kind of keeping, a level amount of stamina. I know that's not necessarily game planning or whatever, but just, preserving yourself on snaps, whether it be, taking a break or, rotating. I think rotations are going to be important. And then on that point, really quickly, I think it will be important for the offense to have long drives to give the defense a break because I think this is going to be a very
Yeah,
old
and
school type of game.
these two teams are coming over to Dublin, so there's going to be some travel, and you have to manage all that type of stuff. The time is totally different. It's going to be, I think it's 12:30, Eastern time is the start here, but that's a much different time. I think that's night over in Europe. I don't know the times that well. My only experience is British Open golf and soccer, so I don't really know that well. But that is going to be a factor. My keys, I think, it's two simple, pretty simple things. I think one, you kind of touched on it, but I believe that Nebraska needs to win the rushing yard battle in this matchup. And which means getting Anthony Grant going, getting Ramir Johnson going, and also shutting down Northwestern's running game. If Nebraska does that, Northwestern's not a great passing team, and I think that they'll win the game. But they've also, running the football offensively is also going to make things easier for Casey Thompson. Let's not have him in 3rd and 10, 3rd and long all day. I think that's going to be important. And then the other thing is win the turnover battle. The turning the football over cost Nebraska that game against Illinois. The safety, the Adrian Martinez fumble that went for a touchdown. Nebraska gave away that opening game to Illinois, and it totally just set the wrong tone for the season. So we can't have that happen. Against Northwestern. I think the way to avoid that is just taking care of the football.
I will say that Illinois and Northwestern have that same type of tough mentality, that same type of grind it out, work for every single yard. Brett Bielema and Pat Fitzgerald, those are their key identities for their programs. So I'll be curious to see what Nebraska does. I mean, I kind of forgot about Illinois mostly because of the booze, but you're right, that Illinois game was an absolute mess. And I just hope we don't see that again because if you remember last year after the Illinois game, that kind of took the wind out of everybody's sails. You could feel it. You could feel it taking, the fans kind
Yeah,
of
and it just was the
saying,
same. I
"Oh,
mean, I
here we
remember
go
there were
again."
a bunch of penalties. I mean, it was just everything imaginable. Um, a, yeah, I mean, the guy. Why are you even trying
Special
to
teams
catch the
fumbled.
punt at like the 3 yard line? What are you doing? I mean, that's high school stuff. I mean, that is literally stuff that you
Yep,
don't do in high school. And then,
yep.
I mean, I can remember Adrian Martinez missing a guy literally wide open in the end zone, which he did like 2 or 3 times every game. Like, I know I like the kid. He was a competitor, but he could not throw the football accurately. I don't care what anybody says. There's no defending some of the misses he had. Go watch the Michigan game last year. He personally lost that game by himself in the fourth quarter, fumbling the ball, wide open guys. He can't hit him. If you can't make plays when it matters, get off the field. And that's why, like it was good he didn't come back. I mean, I like the kid, but he could not do it. He couldn't execute when it mattered, and hopefully Casey Thompson can. I mean, I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm really, watching his highlights, and he can make throws that Adrian Martinez just could not make. He's just not an accurate passer, and maybe that's because Nebraska ran him so much. I mean, you can make lots of different arguments, but his pocket awareness was terrible, and I mean, the guy couldn't even throw an accurate swing pass, honestly. So that's enough of my Adrian Martinez bashing, but you got to take care of the football.
So much of Nebraska's inefficiencies on offense did come down to Adrian, and it's not even that he had the near misses. It just seemed like whenever he got to a certain point in the field where the field was tight and he couldn't really open up on a deep throw to Samori or something like that, he struggled. Those tight red zone throws, he really, really struggled. And hopefully Casey can be a little bit better, but you know it's kind of going to be nice to turn the page on Adrian Martinez. And I know this whole podcast may seem like the Adrian Martinez bashing half hour, but he drove me nuts. And so, if nothing else, I'm looking forward to next Saturday to turn the page for a new era of Husker
Yeah,
football.
hopefully a
Hopefully, a
better
better
one,
one
and yeah,
of
hopefully
Husker football.
Casey Thompson will be the answer this year. I think a huge thing though is going to be the defense, and that's I feel like the defense is going to be really strong this year. I think we've talked about that a little bit, but I think the sack numbers are going to go up, the turnover numbers are going to go up, and I think this is a team that can you know it wouldn't shock me if they were a top 25 defense in scoring. I really think that they have that ability. So let's just kind of look at this depth chart. We're not going to, predict kind of starters at every position like on offense because there's so many more moving parts. But, starting at the defensive line, I think we all know who the edge rushers are going to be. Garrett Nelson, obviously O'Shawn Mathis, Caleb Tanner is going to kind of play edge and outside linebacker. Um, defensive tackle is going to be really interesting. Devin Drew just getting to campus. I'm hopeful he'll be able to contribute in that first game, but we'll see. But overall, what do you think about the defensive line, kind of the edge rushers and the interior guys?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head with O'Shawn Mathis. I am very excited to see him come in because, and we said this on the show before, edge rusher is its own position nowadays. There's no, oh, here's a guy that can get a lot of sacks. He can be the edge rusher. Now teams look for edge rushers. Edge rusher is a big, position in free agency, and it's important because if you can get pressure to the quarterback via the edge rusher, it makes life in turn easier for the secondary. And so a guy like Mathis, I think, will be able to, really help Nebraska get that pass rushing production that they haven't. And then on the other side, I'm thinking, and we talked about this off air a little bit, maybe a guy like Garrett Nelson. Would you agree with that
Yeah, I
in
think it's
terms
gonna.
of
I think
coming off the edge?
Nelson. I think all three of those guys, Tanner, Nelson, Mathis, are going to play a lot. I think there's going to be times where Tanner's playing outside linebacker instead of Nebraska having their nickel guy in there. So I mean, I think because he can stand up and do both. So I think you'll see him there, and then I also think Blaine Gunnerson had a really strong scrimmage last Sunday. They said he's going to get snaps. I love his ability. He's 6'5", like 240. So I think he's going to get some mix in there too. You want those guys rotating around. I think that's a good thing. So all four of those guys I think are going to play a lot. Nelson and Mathis I think are going to play the most, and Tanner too because he can kind of rotate between positions. The only thing is, like, of those guys, there's nobody that you can say is like big enough to say, hey, let's go put you at defensive tackle on third down to pass rush. They don't really have that type of ability. But I still like what they bring from the edge, and I like Ty Robinson on the inside, and I like the additions of Devin Drew and Stephon Wynn from Alabama. I think those were two. Nebraska could not go into the season with the depth that it has at tackle, and I think of all the transfers that the Huskers have picked up, Mathis, Thompson. I think those two defensive tackles are as important as any because if you can't stop the run in the Big Ten, you're not going to win games. So I don't care about the pass rush isn't going to matter if the offense can get 5 yards every single time. So those guys got to step up. And but yeah, I feel good about the pass rush. Worried about the run defense a little bit, but as long as those transfers deliver, and I really like what I've seen from Devin Drew so far and what I've heard, in practice. So I feel good about it, but there's still some question marks.
Well, I think the way our defense is constructed, most of the pass rushing, and I think they planned it this way, is going to come from, the edge guys and the linebackers. I think with the caliber of running backs in the Big Ten, our defensive tackles probably are not going to be expected to rush the passer. Um, a guy like Devin Drew, I think, will probably be able to fill the running lanes. And I think, the defensive tackles are going to be used to stop the run. I don't think we're going to get a ton of pass rushing from them, but I don't think that's why Drew is brought in here. I think he's more of a big body to stop the run, and that's where I think the defensive tackles are going to be. And I think we're just going to leave the pass rushing duties to the edge rushers and the linebackers. And on the subject of linebackers, Luke Reimer and Nick Heinrich, you know, I feel extremely happy that those two are back there. Reimer is an absolute baller. So is Heinrich, and you know they are the future of this Nebraska football defense. And I shouldn't say they are the future. A guy like Reimer already made a massive impact last year, so I'm really excited to see the direction that these linebackers
Yeah, they
go
were
in because I think
both
it can only go
among
up
leading
from
tacklers
here.
last season. I have the stats pulled up here. I can't quite remember, but yeah, Reimer was pretty close to 100 or so tackles, and I know Henrik was right up in that range too. Yeah, Reimer had 108 tackles, a sack, 6 tackles for loss, a pick, 6 pass breakups, 3 forced fumbles. Heinrich had 99 tackles, 3.5 for loss, at a half a sack, and then no other. So no interceptions, no fumble forces, no. So he needs to make more impact plays. His tackles are great, but you need tackles for loss. You need forced fumbles. But yeah, I feel really great about that linebacker group. I feel good about the nickel group. I think they've got some good guys there with Gifford and Javin Wright coming back. So yeah, Nebraska. I saw a recent ranking that they had the number. This is just a college football analyst. I think it was on three, so it doesn't mean anything per se. But they had Nebraska ranked as the number 9
On three, yep.
linebacking crew in the country, and I buy that. I think that that's legit. They've got. I think that Reimer. Honestly, I think Reimer and Henrik are
I
both
do too.
all Big Ten. Not necessarily first team, but I think they're both guys that are gonna. If you look at first, second, and third team, like all Big Ten defense, I think both of those guys are gonna make it. I think Garrett Nelson's gonna make it. I think O'Shawn Mathis is gonna make it. I think Quentin Newsome and Tommy Hill both have a chance to make it at cornerback. Especially, yeah, I was really worried about Cam Taylor Britt, but to switch out to cornerback, the things I've been reading about Tommy Hill, make me feel a little better though that he's gone. How do you feel about the cornerbacks? We'll start there.
I loved Tommy Hill. I wanted Tommy Hill ever since Nebraska recruited him during his recruitment process, and the coaching staff has given him high praise. I remember reading an article a couple weeks ago where Scott Frost said he could be an NFL caliber type of player, and so I love his physicality that he brings to the game. He has tremendous pursuit on the football, good vision, good angle. He takes good angles on tackles, and so I feel really confident um, with him back there in the secondary. I know he's also gotten some special teams work because of his speed and his hands. So I'll be interested to see where he factors there. But I absolutely love Hill and the rest of the secondary. I think that a guy like Isaac Gifford, if he's even half as good as his brother, then I think we got something. Because I always liked watching Luke play. So I mean, yes, we have a lot of, I'm not going to say unproven, but new depth. But I think there are stuff there. The cupboard's not bare, and I don't really think they're project players, so to speak. I
Yeah, and I
truly
honestly
think
I think
that
you look
there's
at all
talent there.
three levels of the defense. I mean, even defensive tackle, they've got some nice young pieces, recruits that are developing. But inside linebacker, they've got some really nice pieces. Cornerback, I'm a little worried about the depth this season. An injury or two, but the top end guys are really good. I think I talked about Jaden Gould before on this podcast. I believe in him if he's got to play. I do think though that they brought in Brandon Moore, the guy from UCF, for a reason. He played corner. He can play kind of safety. He could be a nickelback. Just a guy who started as another depth option if need be. But yeah, I feel really good about Nebraska's starters, and I honestly feel really good about the safety position. And I like that Shenander's talking about rotating guys in. I like playing extra, three safeties sometimes. And Farmer, Buford. I really like Omar Brown, Singleton. I've always really been high on Noah Pulagates. He's had injuries and stuff, but I think that dude can make some things happen. I think he'd be perfect for like the nickel slot role. I've said this before, but I wish that Nebraska would get away from playing the linebacker as their nickel. I just don't think that's a good strategy in today's world of college football. But I digress.
I mean, to be completely honest with you, I had my doubts about Shenander, but seeing what he did last year, I mean, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I agree with you about the linebacker piece, but there was some obvious, improvement from 2 years ago to last year. So I'm willing to let things be because let's face this too. Shenander was one of the only coaches on the original staff that remained after the purge, so to speak, last year. So I'm excited to see what he does this year because I think he has some really good athletes, and you know, where he plugs them in and plays them is going to be fascinating to see because for the first time in a while, I think
Yeah,
he
and
has some
I have
really
to give him
promising
credit too,
depth.
because JoJo Damon was just a special guy, a special athlete, so he had to find a way to get him on the field. I just don't know if these other nickel guys are going to have the same impact as JoJo, and sometimes I just would like to see a fifth defensive back as opposed to an extra linebacker. But that's just me. But I do think Shanader's done a good job, and the defense was not the issue last year. They had a good enough defense. That defense was good enough to win 8 or 9 games, frankly. And Nebraska as a team they were definitely had the talent of a bowl team. They just had a combination of choking at the worst time and playing a really really tough schedule. If this team played an easier schedule, they could have easily been bowling last year. So I think there's a lot of, I think these are all factors why Trev decided to stick with Scott Frost because even though this isn't the reason to stick with the coach. I mean, you could see from either other coaches, everybody had said Nebraska, you can see it with your eyes, they're better. The results just haven't followed. So hopefully they will this year. Hopefully we'll get that done this year. But yeah, it's going to be exciting overall, though. I made this prediction the other day on my website, 5 bowl predictions. But I think Nebraska is going to almost double their sack production. They're almost going to double their turnover production, and I think this is going to be a top 25 defense.
Yeah. And you mentioned some of the names earlier, guys like, and I'm just, this is just my opinion, but I think a guy like Reimer, Mathis, you know, and Heinrich, they could potentially have NFL futures as well. Because when you look at a guy like Jojo Doman, you know, Reimer plays with that same sort of intensity. Nelson plays with that same sort of intensity. So we could have a couple of potential NFL players on this defense. Now I'm not saying they're going to be Hall of Famers or anything, but I do think that there is enough talent here to warrant some more um, NFL caliber players in the Scott Frost era. I saw a graphic the other day where I think Frost has put more players into the NFL than PJ Fleck, because it's always fun to pick on PJ Fleck because he's obnoxious. But I don't know if you saw that
I
graphic,
didn't
but I think it was
see
like
it, but I
22
believe it.
players.
Nebraska's had the most talent of any program in the Big Ten West. Just have to get the talent to meet the result on the field, and I believe it's going to happen this season. I'm a hard Kool Aid drinker. I always have been. So we'll see if if the Kool Aid serves us right this year. I don't know.
I'm excited to just have football back again and to watch some games and actually have things to talk about on all these. I do a lot of other college football shows too, and it's just been recruiting and hypotheticals. I'm excited to have some actual games
And you know
to
what?
talk
Win or
about within the
lose,
next couple of weeks
I
here.
always will love Nebraska football. There's something special about hearing that song, seeing the red, holding the guys up, and they've got the captains, how they do that. If you've ever been to, Lincoln Memorial Stadium and see them hold the captains up like that, being in the tunnel, I had the chance to had those guys, clap my hand going out of there when I was a kid. And it's just, there's something special about it. So I'm excited to see that anyway. Either way, no matter what happens this season, we'll always be, loyal to the Big Red no matter what. But we do want a winner, so hopefully we'll get that. And our livers can't handle any more hard drinking this year. So
No, I don't think so. The Michigan State game, you talk about season changing trajectories. Just to back up real quick, I think that was a huge game that changed the trajectory of the season last year. It felt like all the air was taken out of the optimistic balloon, so to speak. That game. Ugh, I remember I had to do a show after that game, and I just canceled it. I couldn't even do it. I was just like, this is so depressing. I'm going to bed, and because the thing about that game, not to go off on a tangent here, but that's what I do anyway,
yeah,
is
stuffed
that we
him.
held Kenneth Walker to minimal production and
Yep.
still,
Well,
yeah,
at any
still
rate,
can get
this
anything done.
year it's going to change, and we're going to beat Oklahoma. That's my prediction. So with that, we're getting to about the witching hour here on our podcast, but we're going to have a lot more content. Make sure you're following us here, subscribing on the Apple Podcasts or Spotify, anywhere else you can find it. You can find this podcast. So comment, check out the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. We're going to have a lot of videos going up there, more stuff. We're going to be trying to do some live streams like watch parties during games. So, if you're not somebody that can make it to the games, hang out with Danny and I. We're going to give you a lot better analysis than the jackasses on ESPN who don't know anything about Nebraska football. So, hang out with us and, check out huskerbigred.com. Check out Danny's work over at thegreatcornholio.org. And as always, go Big Red.